How can you tell if a river or a stream is healthy and clean? Do you look at the water's color, its clarity? Do you look to see if it's filled with trash or if there's plenty of fish swimming in it? Professionals look at physical, chemical, and biological indicators to determine the health of a river or a stream. So the first indicator we use is physical indicators. Have you ever stepped into a river or stream only to sink into the muck and mud? Have you ever seen a river that is so cloudy with silt and dirt that you can't see the bottom? When we discuss physical indicators of water health, we are concerned with the levels of sediment. Sediment is what makes rivers mucky and cloudy. Sediment is dirt and silt that piles up in rivers. High levels of sediment can clog fish gills and suffocate them. Sediment typically comes from eroding riverbanks. Normally, there should be trees and plants growing alongside the river or the riparian area. These trees and plants hold the soil with their roots. Unfortunately, if these trees or plants are removed for things such as farming or flood prevention, the riverbanks can erode a lot and add a ton of sediment to the rivers. We look at the amount of sediment in rivers in two different ways. First, we use turbidity tubes. These are long tubes with a small black and white marker called a Secchi disc at the bottom. We fill these tubes with water from the river. Then, a person observes the tube and slowly releases water from it until a black and white marker becomes visible. When the black and white marker becomes visible, we stop releasing the water and read how much water remains in the tube. This gives us the transparency of the water, also known as turbidity. These tubes are a great way to measure sediments, and they can be used in the field. A second way that we measure sediments is through total suspended solids. For this test, we collect samples of water in clean jars. We then take these samples into the lab for testing. The testing is simple. We first weigh a very fine filter and record its weight. Then, we pour a known amount of our sample water through the filter and let it dry completely. Finally, after the filter paper is completely dry, we take it and we weigh it once more. The total suspended solid is the final paper weight minus the initial paper weight divided by the total volume of water that we used. Typically, we measure this using milligrams when weighing the paper, and we convert our water amount into liters. Another physical indicator of water quality is temperature. Temperature can be measured using a digital or glass thermometer. Temperature is important because it can impact aquatic life. Warm water can harm aquatic life, as warm water holds less oxygen than cold water. This is especially harmful for fish and aquatic animals that need oxygen to survive. Even though you can see sediment, you may be surprised by how much sediment is actually in the water. Now, you can see sediment, but other water quality indicators are not as readily visible. Another way that we measure water quality health is through chemical indicators, which tend to be invisible to the naked eye. However, we can use tools to reveal them. There are several important chemical indicators that we look at, including pH, dissolved oxygen, and electrical conductivity. If you have ever had a pool or a fish aquarium, you may be familiar with pH. pH is the measure of how acidic or basic a substance is. pH is measured on a scale of 0 through 14, with 0 being the most acidic and 14 being the most basic. A pH of 7 is considered neutral. When water is too acidic, it can dissolve metals, which is toxic to both plants and animals. When water is too basic, it can convert non-toxic ammonia into a toxic form of ammonia. Typically, aquatic plants and animals need the water to be near neutral to function, grow, and survive. Oxygen, such an important element for life. Take a deep breath and feel your lungs expand full of oxygen from the air. Just like us, aquatic life needs oxygen, though they don't breathe air like us. Instead, they remove oxygen from the water. Dissolved oxygen is another chemical parameter we investigate when looking at water quality. Dissolved oxygen just describes how much oxygen is dissolved in the water, which is available to aquatic life. This is closely related to temperature. As previously mentioned, cold water can hold more oxygen than warm water. Having more oxygen in the water is better for aquatic life. We measure dissolved oxygen using a special probe. The final chemical indicator that we're going to talk about today is electrical conductivity. Water, as many people know, can conduct electricity. This is because the water is very effective at dissolving other substances, as we discussed before. This increases the levels of ions in the water. It is the ions in the water that allows water to conduct electricity, not the water itself. Deionized water, sometimes used in chemistry labs and humidifiers, does not conduct electricity. Electrical conductivity is an indirect way to measure for dissolved pollutants such as salts and metals in the water. We measure it using a special probe. The final key to indicating the health of a stream is by looking at biological indicators. Biological indicators simply refers to aquatic life in and around the river or stream. Scientists look at the diversity of aquatic life and how specific species are impacted by pollution to draw conclusions about the health of a river. Aquatic life, such as fish and macroinvertebrates, can be tolerant, moderately tolerant, or intolerant of pollution. When an organism is intolerant of pollution, even small amounts of a pollutant can kill them. We sometimes call this being sensitive to pollution. An organism that is moderately tolerant can live with small amounts of pollution, but high levels can kill them. An organism that is tolerant of pollution can live when there is high levels of pollution in the water. Scientists sample aquatic organisms in rivers to help indicate the health of the river. They use kick nets and D-ring nets to collect macroinvertebrates from the bottom of the river and from the river's edges. They use electroline fishing nets to collect fish by sending out a small electric charge that stuns the fish, making it easier to collect them. After collecting samples, scientists identify the organisms. In Ohio, we use the fish IBI and the Maze system in order to calculate the health of the stream. These systems take into consideration the number of organisms collected, the number of different species found, and the level of sensitivity the organisms have to the pollution to create a numerical value. This numerical value can be used as a reference for the general biological health of the river. A healthy river should have a variety of species, not just one or two different species. And there should be species that are unable to tolerate pollution in the water, as this indicates low levels of pollution in the water. Another biological indicator that typically means the river is healthy is a large number of amphibians, such as salamander or frogs. Amphibians are unable to tolerate pollution, so having them in your river means it's likely not polluted. If you want to explore some of the techniques that we talked about today, or create your own tools to monitor water quality, check out these activities.